Okay. That was fun, watching the kids. It was fun watching you adults, too. And I'm hopeful. This morning, I told Alana right before I came up here, I said this morning has a whole different feel than I was anticipating when I would step up here. Not necessarily bad, just different. I didn't realize it was Kids Sunday when I kind of had landed on what I wanted, or what it felt like Jesus was leading me towards. And yet I think it plays in really well, because this morning I've been feeling the need to talk about worship, and where powerful worship comes from, and the effects of powerful worship, and maybe some things that kind of cut off that and cut off our worship at the pass. And so seeing the kids and the adults and you guys up here hanging out and jumping around, that's awesome. That is something that I want to dive specifically into this morning. And I'm hopeful that you guys can track with me. I told Darius, we were talking about this morning and the preparation and whatever, and it feels like this subject is super foundational and has enough bunny trails that you could spend a long, long time going after it. And so I feel like I'm a little stuck between don't just hit the bullet points and throw out a bunch of things. On the other hand, I want to be able to speak to you guys in a way that I hope connects with you in worship. And I'm just going to throw this out there specifically because there are things that we're going to talk about today that a lot of the cultures that we grew up in didn't give us the best tools to engage in worship the way that the Bible looks at it, or the way that Jesus looks at it. And we're going to dive specifically into that. But I wanted to kind of battle that immediately and kind of put it out there and say, we're going to talk about some things that some of us haven't been taught and that I don't feel like I've have the firmest grasp on yet. So this morning, I would love to dive in with you guys. It's kind of fun having a smaller group, honestly, when you're sitting up here, because it feels like I can just kind of chat and you guys can hang out. So sorry for you guys that aren't here, but you're making it easier on me, I guess. So let's dive into what worship is and what it is not, I guess. So as I was like that word in itself feels like something to me that, as you say, what is worship? What is worship to you? Is it the same thing that it is to me? It felt like a bit of a discovery mode that I had to go into. Pardon my daughter freaking out. So as I had to dive into what is worship to me, is worship on Sunday mornings from 10 a.m. to 10:33 or whatever is that what worship is? Like worship is encompassed by the music time of a church service. And there was just like this, no, it can't be. It has to be bigger than that. And so I dove back into, well, what is worship? Why does Jesus want, is worship something he desires? How do I bring worship to Jesus in an appropriate way? And something I really quickly landed on was that worship is not for me. Like, I am a secondary beneficiary, to be clear. You do benefit from appropriate worship and adoration for Jesus, but you are not the primary point. Just so we can kind of get you guys up and out of the way immediately, I am not the point of my worship. So worship in definition is giving worth to something or someone and saying you are worth more than what I currently have. You are worth more, and I'm willing to give up to worship or give worth to something else. And so there's just so many things that try to jump in that driver's seat. And I'm sure you guys' minds can go down different paths. There's just so many things that jump into my worship driver's seat that I place there or the devil places there, and hopefully most of the time that Jesus is placing there. So giving worth, giving adoration, appropriate types of reverence is where we want to start with worship. So I want to talk about, let's just jump into some text so we can battle this appropriately. So let's jump into Ephesians 6. If you have your Bibles, grab them and pull them out. We're going to read about 7 verses, I think. So we've read this passage a few times in the last month or two, and it felt like it just completely applied again today. So Ephesians 6, we're going to start in verse 10, and this doesn't feel like it ties in immediately, and I'm okay with that. So let's dive into Ephesians 6, verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. I'm going to stop there. There's a few more things that we'll read here, but I do not want to skip over the belt of truth, because this morning, I think that's what we're going after, is strapping on the belt of truth and saying, what are the ways that worship maybe has been misdefined in my own life and maybe in you guys's? Let's go after the belt of truth specifically as we talk about the armor of God this morning. So having fastened on the belt of truth and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints. The reason this verse tied in for me really well, and I hope this connects with you guys, is because as I studied worship, as it's defined in the Bible, I felt like there was some disconnect in my heart from what Jesus wants from me in worship and what my definition of worship is. And so I had to dive backwards and say, okay, well, where did that come from? What created my misdefinition of worship? And to me, there was just some truth that I needed to acknowledge in my life that was missing, and saying, I don't think I'm actually understanding what worship is intended to be from Jesus and for Jesus, from me for Jesus. So that's the reason I wanted to read this section and kind of go after the belt of truth that we're going to try and strap back on this morning in terms of worship. So, worship is not contained in Sunday mornings. And I know you guys know that. I know you guys know it's not. When we talk about these things logically, it's really easy to say, well, no, it doesn't just happen on a Sunday morning. But a heart full of worship that's entertained over the week, that is given into Jesus over the week, absolutely spills over into Sunday morning. So it is involved in Sunday morning. It's easy for me to try and build worship into something that I give to Jesus when my emotions are lined up. Like when I feel correct, when the music is just right, then my worship happens, because I feel and I receive and I get something back. And so I say, okay, well, that must be worship when I feel that connection is made. And I guess I want to battle that just a little bit and say that worship is not specifically when you guys or when I feel that connection is made. That just when I feel like I'm receiving, that then I've worshiped. Does that make sense? So, because I think it's really easy in this, because of some background that a lot of us have, to equate emotions and worship, to kind of lump them in the same bucket. To say, okay, when I feel good, then worship must be happening. And I was wanting to, I want to get to a point this morning of giving worth to someone that's worth giving to. So I have a little something that I was thinking about as I think about who I want to worship and the things that I give into. It's natural and it's the right response as I ask you guys, who do you guys worship? Who do you want to worship? And we say, well, Jesus. And there's so many things that we live out that direction. And there's so many ways that I will step out of this church building and tomorrow morning place something else on the throne and go after. And so I guess I'm trying to dive past the pat answers and saying, Jesus is what I worship, and saying, is he really who I worship? And how does that get proven in a life? So as I thought about Jesus and what my worship to him brings, it has to be more than just when I receive. So Jesus, what happens when a heart is actually surrendered to Jesus? And I say, Jesus, you are worth me giving my failures, my fears, and my anxieties. I'm not going to white knuckle and hang on to those. You're worth giving that to and allowing him to take over. He's also worth giving my gifts, my talents, the positive attributes about me. He's worth giving that to in worship. So what happens if in my heart I am truly in worship of Jesus throughout a week, not just in the surrender moments of when the music is good, but when I say, Jesus, everything that I have, everything that I am, everything that creates Ryan, the good things and the bad things, like I'm going to give all of that back because he is worth it. I'm giving worth to him. So that's where my heart is this morning, is saying, have you found that Jesus is worthy of giving yourself back to? That's where I want to go this morning in worship. So there's just so many avenues that we could go down. And I want to talk about this at first, is aligning myself with the identity that Jesus has given me. So as I step into the identity that Jesus gives me, and I say, no matter what I feel like today, if I'm having a good day or if I'm having a bad day, my identity has not changed. So my identity as a son of God does not change. Okay, so my worship to Jesus is not dependent on whether I'm feeling good this morning or whether I'm not. And that to me starts to open doors to say, well, what do I need when I don't connect with Jesus? When I want to and I don't, what do I need? And so I want to, like Steve has talked some about how Catholicism has really influenced our church experience, and what we've tried to create and put worship of Jesus into a box that says we follow a procedure, we have liturgy, we have tradition, we have these things that we put in a box, and we say this is how Jesus works. Following this format makes Jesus work. I just want to come up against that pretty definitively this morning. Like Old Testament, New Testament, there was sacrifice. Then Jesus came and said, no, you don't need to do that. And he said, those who worship me will worship me in spirit and in truth. And there's no more liturgy needed. There's no more procedure. There's no more animal sacrifice. But it is replaced by really personal sacrifice that I give worth to Jesus and say, you are worth me giving my life back to. So I think I came up with this, and I'm not sure that I'm at peace with it yet, but I think it's accurate. I think worship, the things that you worship, can be defined by, it's basically a broadcast of your priorities. So when my priorities are broadcast to you guys, it helps you guys and myself know what I'm worshiping. So if you guys are sitting there saying, okay, so how do I even know what I'm worshiping? That was something Alana asked me as we talked about this. So how does a person define, am I worshiping something that I shouldn't be? And I'd be interested in you guys' thoughts on that, because I'm not sure that I have a clear answer on that. How you take something that you're passionate about and it doesn't turn into worship, I'm not sure that I actually have a great answer. And so if one of you guys does, you can just interrupt me.
I do have a thought on that.
Okay, hit me.
I jotted some things down here. A while back I read something about worship being abiding. We worship, we abide in. And I don't know if this is accurate to what it said, but we can figure out what we abide in by what consumes our mind, what we worry about. The things that we worry about tend to be what we abide in. There may be some connection there between the negative side of life, which is fears and worry.
Yep.
Those things that we abide in, and we worship what we abide in.
So can abiding be quantified? Can I say what I spend most of my time thinking on or worrying about or progressing towards? Is that what abiding is? Like, how do I know if I'm abiding in something? Because okay, as we talk about this concept, I told Alana as I was studying, I feel like there's like 100 things that I'm going to try and pull together in one basket, and yet there's so much content that I don't want to just hit 40 bullet points and you guys go walk out and say, I'm not sure what the point was. So let's talk about abiding, like Steve said. As we dive into things that you may worship and things you do not, we've talked a lot in the last couple months about being honest. Start from an honest place. Start with the belt of truth, which is why this verse felt key to me, was saying I need to get back to truth. I need to know what Jesus says about worship. I want to understand how it works and looks for Ryan. And then I want to communicate belts of truth that the rest of you can put on. And it feels like if I can just shoot through the crap, it feels like maybe our cultures that we grew up in have a little extra something to dive through in terms of worship, because there was some structure and there was some fear and anxieties around the term of worship that I want to become comfortable acknowledging and fighting back against. So if we want to get to an appropriate place of worship, it does start from an honest place of us acknowledging our priorities and saying, you know what, like in this moment, if I had to pick the thing that sits on the throne for me most of the time, it is fear. Like it is fear. I'm very scared of like how my life might turn out, or how my kids are going to turn out, or if my husband's going to have an accident today, or if they're like, starting from an honest place. It says, these are the things that consume my mind during a normal day, the things that I abide in. It might be true that you guys abide in personal comfort. Like that is probably the thing that I would abide in outside of Jesus the most, that I can identify with, is personal comfort. Just making sure that everything works for me, that in every situation and everything that I chase, that somehow there's a really cool ending for Ryan, that it works out really well for me. That is something that I chase and have to push back on frequently, because there's just these little bits of truth that the devil uses and weaves into my life, where he says it is okay for me to hang out at home and watch a movie with my family. Like that is okay. But there's these personal comfort stages where that becomes what consumes me, and before I know it, everything is angling towards my personal comfort. So that for me is where I need to start honestly and say, I'm comfortable with things not always being perfect for Ryan. A big one that we often talk about is money. Like making sure that I have enough for my family. I do want to provide well for my family. I really do. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also don't want to be consumed. And I want to be healthy and honest with where I'm at with that struggle of money, because the love of money. Because of. And so there's some honest things. And then what I don't want to overlook, though, is I don't want to come up with a critical spirit that says, if you search, you will find wicked. Because you might, but that's not the point of this morning's sermon. This morning, what I really want to get to is saying, so what is appropriate worship and appropriate reverence for Jesus look like? Something I ran into really, really quickly along this road was that worship has to be accompanied by thankfulness. It has to. Like worship without thankfulness, I'm not quite sure how you get there. And so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. And as you guys acknowledge and start to think about your personal lives, where you guys are at in terms of worship with Jesus, do you enjoy being with Jesus? Do you enjoy going after Jesus? If you don't, do you recognize the importance of doing that? Does Jesus feel like a factor in your life that needs to affect your life? I want to get past the churched-in things in us that say there are appropriate answers for the questions we ask, and dive into honest answers. So I want to start talking a little bit about what thankfulness and worship do together. Let's jump over to Colossians 3. If you guys have your Bibles, let's rip over to there. As I talked about worship and looked into it and thankfulness and how things play together, because what I can find for myself is that I can acknowledge that thankfulness and worship is not happening, and I don't have a game plan to get there. And I'm not sure how to close the gap and say, well, then what does it look like to actually get into a space where I'm thankful and worship? So Colossians 3:15 through 17, in this context, listen to the amount of times he talks about being thankful as he prioritizes things here. So Colossians 3, verse 15, and let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which you indeed were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Thankfulness came up 3 for 3 and goes right along with the peace and serving each other and all of the things that we want our church body to be. And thankfulness is required. Selfishness, personal comfort, fear, which is just a protection method, all of those things will fly in the face of the thankfulness that Colossians is pointing out in these verses. And so I just want to get to a place of honesty with you guys where I say, man, sometimes I'm not very thankful. I wake up in the morning, I want my life to work for me. I'd like to make twice the money that I do, and I'd really love to have a new house. Like, those are the things that hit my brain. I'm like, it is really difficult for me to worship from a place where there's lack of thankfulness. And so that feels like a super basic, down-to-earth thing, but I really want to walk away from this morning with some tools that I can say, okay, I'm not feeling like worship for Jesus is something that my life prioritizes. How do I start that path? So as I think about thankfulness, it requires me to ask Jesus and understand what he's done for me and realize the things that he's brought into my life. And for me recently, that has been very much a resetting and saying, Jesus, you really are the reason that my life is good. the reason that I do have healthy kids and a healty wife. You are the reason that I do enjoy my job. And I love coming to church with you guys, and Jesus is the reason for that. Robin, as a really cool stage, it is so fun. It is really fun when you see things in your kids and you can equate that back to my relationship with Jesus. Robin is at a super cool little stage where she just yells help all the time if she needs anything. And so we go to the Buffalo, and I don't want to put a number on it. Frequently, per hour, a little child will go floating on the Buffalo, and I'll hear, "Daddy, help!" And so we go get her and bring her back in, and 5 minutes later, she's back out in the Buffalo and floating, "Help!" And so it's a continuing game. And I was thinking about that this morning and thinking how in that Robin recognizes and gives worth to someone that has an ability or brings her a value that she wants. And she's, I'm sure, not going that deep with it. She just doesn't want to float away. But she is giving value and saying, I need something that I don't have. And she's not afraid to say, like, someone give me what I need. And I thought about that with my relationship with Jesus, and that is what Jesus has brought alive to me in worship in the last couple months, is Jesus is working out of me the fear of saying, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I actually need Jesus to step into this. I actually need Sam to just tell me, just shoot straight with me and tell me where I'm at. Losing the need for you guys' approval, I guess. As much as I love you guys, I don't want you guys to have to fight for my approval, and I don't want to fight for yours. And it feels like that to me as I start to strip away the layers that cause fear and anxiety in me and the need for approval from you guys, it in tandem opens up my ability to put the worth on Jesus, who's actually creating the value in my life. And so I come up against fear with thankfulness. And I just want to promote thankfulness this morning. We've talked about who you have on the throne and what you have on the throne. Being thankful for Jesus, allowing yourself to actually go to a place that says, I'm not actually sure that I could do this well by myself. And also being able to say, Jesus, you're worth giving my good stuff to, and allowing Jesus to use your talent and your gifts and your money and your abilities to say, Jesus, whatever you need, you have the stuff that I have. You've given me it. Also being allowed to say, I also have fear and anxiety, and I'm kind of a package deal, and I'm okay with that. Like, Jesus, would you just take me as I am because you're worth it, because my worship points back to someone who is worth giving myself to. So what do you guys think of when you think of spiritual strongholds? Because we just read about them in Ephesians. What do you guys think of in terms of spiritual strongholds, things that might come up against your ability to worship appropriately to Jesus? Like as I think about strongholds, my first thought out of the gate is that I'm typically free of them. Like that's just what comes out of my brain. I'm like, that's a big deal that I don't really have to deal with. I would be interested in you guys' feedback on ways that you guys, as you look at worship and say, what does it look like for a life that is willing to be given back to Jesus in complete reckless abandon? All of the good stuff, all of the bad stuff, and giving that back to Jesus as a form of worship. Does it feel like there's anything in the way for you guys to be able to do that? Because for me, I can really quickly name some things. I can say, that's the right answer is to say, yeah, absolutely I would. And I want to dive past that answer in my own heart, because the way that I live will work out whether I'm actually willing to give that answer or not. So I'm less interested in the answer that I give or the answer that you guys give verbally, and more interested in what I'll live out tomorrow and through the rest of the week, and the same for you guys. I would love for you guys to walk out of here and ask yourself, what if I had to be honest, is Jesus actually worthy of me giving my life to? Giving the good things and saying the things that I have are from you, I'm giving them back. The things that are not from you, I'm going to trust you with also. What does it look like for a life to be given to Jesus in worship? So I want to just encourage you guys as you process and think through worship to be comfortable with being honest, to be comfortable with diving into the honest answers of where you're at. Are you willing to give yourself back to Jesus as a form of worship. And there's so many avenues. We can talk about the gifts that you have, the things throughout the week, Monday through Saturday. It's not just a thing that happens Sunday morning. But a life that's lived in worship Monday through Saturday absolutely will spill over into Sunday. So I had said earlier we were going to talk specifically about our culture. I'd love to do that. I hope this doesn't feel like toe-stepping, because that's not the intent. I told Alana, as I was thinking through how to say this, I told her I just don't want to come across as a critical or a person that's just angling towards things that I just want to point out. But I prayed through that, and it felt like Jesus brought me this Ephesians verse where it said, finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, and the battlefield clarified, I guess, in my mind, where I said, I'm not fighting against anybody here or even myself that might feel that worship is a certain thing. I want to come up against, in our church, in my life and in yours, I want to come up against the things that the devil is bringing to put strongholds in place. So that is the angle of anything this morning that we talk about, is saying, what is the devil's plan for our church? How do we come up against that and step into the framework that Jesus has already built? So in my honesty with myself, I said, you know what? I'm not sure that I actually have built or intended to build a good foundation for freedom in worship. Freedom to be able to give myself back to Jesus, whether that's during a Sunday morning from 10 to 10:30 or not, or whether it's willingness to just give my life back to Jesus. I don't know that my life has been structured around freedom in giving that back to Jesus. And so I think there's just some really quick conversations we could all get to, and a lot of us, there's a few here that I don't know about, but a lot of us grew up in a culture where worship was a very structured thing. It was a very reverent, very calm environment. That can be the environment of worship. That can be. There's a real tendency in that, though, to then look at the other side and say anything that is much more than that must be emotion-based and must be actually over the top or a performance. And I just want to come up against and say, you know what? There are two ditches. There is a ditch that puts us in fear, and there's a ditch that puts us in over-emotion or in performance. In the middle of those is a road that does not require fear. And that's what we're going after, is saying less than the activity. We're not saying we want more activity or less activity in your worship during the week and during Sunday mornings. Activity is not the point. It can look exactly the way as it does today or entirely different, because that's not the intent. The intent is not the amount of activity to prove or not prove your worship to Jesus. The intent is freedom. The intent is saying, I am free to give my life back to Jesus. I'm free to let Jesus take pieces of my life and own them. Freedom is not a show of what you're able to do. Freedom is the freedom to not have to need the approval of other people. Like, freedom is my ability that Jesus gives me to say, it's actually okay if Darius disagrees with me. It's actually okay if Steve walks away from this sermon and says, I just do not think anything you said was okay. I'm like, the freedom is to say, that's okay. I still feel like it was from Jesus, and we can talk about that. But the freedom to not say, this morning I need to walk away and everyone needs to tell me, very good job. I'm like, I feel free to not have that need. And so I want to experience that freedom with you guys as we jump into worship of Jesus with each other, because there is worship in your closet and there is worship corporately, and they are absolutely both important. Karen made a really cool statement. I told her I wasn't going to give her credit for it. I'm going to anyway. Karen, at Friday morning prayer, we had a good time and talked about some of this stuff. And Karen said, if I had to choose between people having having freedom in worship corporately, like Sunday mornings, or freedom in their worship at home, she said, I would choose home. I would choose home. And she's absolutely right, because a person that is free to worship at home, it will spill over. And so that's my desire for you guys, is don't walk away with the feeling that says, we just want more activity. I'm saying, no. I want you guys and myself to experience the freedom of Jesus in your homes, with your kids, the joy of Jesus overtaking your homes and your lives, and it's spilling into everything you do. When you walk into work, when you walk into a messy situation with people, when you guys get married and you and your spouse don't get along, when you guys have kids, like when there's family trouble and when there's good times, acknowledging that Jesus is worthy of giving all of the good and all of the bad and giving it back. I have just, as I think about worship specific to me, there are few things I enjoy as much as serving you guys here at Oasis. Being involved at church, and Alana and I getting to do the things that Jesus has built us to do, and doing it with you guys at Oasis, there are just few things that I enjoy more than that. And so when I thought about worship and what worship means, as I allow freedom to overtake my heart and I allow the approval that I feel that I need from you guys to dissipate and say, I actually don't need Lane and Jenna's approval. Like, I love them and I want to have a good relationship with them, but I actually don't need their approval and they don't need mine. It just hit me with the atmosphere that Jesus is capable of bringing. And I so badly want to worship Jesus with you guys. Like, I want to stand with every one of you guys as you guys have victories and put my arms around you guys and praise Jesus and thank him for the victories that you guys have as we recognize Jesus bringing the value that he says he'll bring, the peace beyond understanding and the victory that he promises. Like, I want times where, like David, he's dancing in the street because life is good and Jesus has brought victory. And I want to do that individually and with my family. I absolutely want to do it with you guys as you guys experience victory. I just want to experience all the emotions that Jesus has. Like, I want to know what Jesus has implanted and not fight back against emotion, because that's where my heart comes from, is that over emotion is a show and a performance. And I just want to fight back against that and say, I want all the emotions Jesus has. I want every one. Like, I want to dance in the streets. I want to cry in the garden. Like, when life is too much, like, I want that too. I want to experience the care that you guys can bring when my life is sadder than usual or when there's loss. Like, I want to feel the emotions that says Jesus cares so much, and I want to put my arms around you guys and say, I'll walk with you. The way Jesus has walked with me, I want to walk with you guys. I'm interested in you guys taking a few questions away and just asking and getting to grips with honest answers. Is Jesus worthy of your money? Is Jesus worthy of your anxiety? Is he worthy of your fear? Is he worthy of you giving that to him and saying, I'm not sure what to do with this. I'm not sure how to use this. Is he worthy of everything that makes up you? And I know that the answer is a quick yes. I would encourage some serious deep digging and some honesty in saying, am I actually giving those things back to him? Is there things that I keep back for myself? Could that be inhibiting complete worship of Jesus? So as you guys walk out of here this morning, be honest. Ask Jesus, because it is worth it. The journey is worth it. And I'm not worried about where everyone is at. We've talked about getting where we're trying to get. There's no destination. There's not somebody that's in front of you or behind you. We're just saying there's a journey to worship in Jesus, and I'm interested in all of you experiencing that, and I want to experience that with you guys. So I feel like I'm having a tough time bringing all of these together. I'm just going to leave it as it is. I would love to dismiss the kids, and we'll hang out and chat a little bit. I'm interested in where you guys see worship, how you guys see yourselves, strongholds that you guys maybe have experienced or that you've had victory over. Have some ideas for the rest of us. So I'll pray and then we'll dismiss the kids. Jesus, thank you for this morning. Thank you for loving us and blessing us. Thank you for taking care of us always. Jesus, I just pray as we just consider worship and what powerful worship looks like and what giving our lives back to you looks like and the forms of worship that you've built each of us to engage in. Jesus, I just pray that that would be clear, that we would be willing to give that back to you. Jesus, I just give like all of me back to you. Jesus, as you... There's things that I wrestle with that I want to do on my own, and there's fears that I have that I want to keep attached to me, and I want to give those back to you. And there's talents and abilities that you've built in me, Jesus, and I want to give those back to you. Jesus, I want worship to happen in my life, in my family, in Oasis. Jesus, would you just open our eyes to that? In your name, amen. Kids, you guys can roll out. Uh-oh. Wow. That was a burnout. Okay, I am super interested in conversation, and that's part of the reason I'm kind of glad it's a smaller group, because we have time and have enough people that you could all talk if you want. What about worship? Because it took me at least a week to work to where I felt like I had a semblance of a grasp of what worship for Jesus actually looks like, because I'm so used to framing that in a way that says worship is when I raise my hands. Worship is when my emotions feel right, and it feels like it's been difficult for me to get on the track, and I feel like I don't want to leave it unclear. So what hits you guys this morning as we talk about worship and the struggles that maybe you guys have had handed to you, or the victories you guys have had? What hits you guys as we talk about worship and the avenues that goes down? Because there's many.